use Marin. She's our go-to here for the webinar. Shout out to Marin. Thank you. And just reach out to her if you don't see it posted, but I suspect we'll be emailing it. No problem. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. I know that there'll still be some folks that are joining us, but first off, wanted to thank everyone for joining the webinar today for CU Collaborate's webinar. My name is Chris Tissue. I'll give a little bit of a background in a second, but first wanted to go over just some of the administrative items. Everyone should be muted and their cameras are off just to cut down on sort of the noise and focus on the presentation. We will be running through the presentation first and then hopefully saving a lot of time at the end for a question and answer and hopefully some really good discussion. Please post your questions to the chat as you see fit. Feel free to engage in dialogue there. It's open for everyone. But yeah, I think that covers all of the tech stuff as Kelly asked. And for those of you that are just joining, we will post a recording of this webinar. So that if any of your team members want to reference it later, they'll be given access to that. By way of an agenda, we'll just quickly cover who we are as a company and who we are as a team here. I'm joined by Bob Fenner and Emily Hughes. My name is Chris Tissue. After talking a little bit about CU Collaborate, we'll jump into why we're talking about field of membership at all. It's very important. But in particular, we've got some topics that we would like to share with you that we feel are extra important. Maybe biased a little bit due to our work, and really want to dive into some of the regulatory landscape with field of membership and talk about the pros and cons of two of the main charter types. So first off, yeah, just a little bit about CU Collaborate for those of us that, or for those of you that aren't familiar with us. I do see a lot of familiar names out there, so welcome and thank you for joining and for being a member of CU Collaborate. CU Collaborate is a challenger. The term consultancy is crossed out because we have a large consulting business that is doing great and we're excited about, but we also have a lot of other great research and software that we are just as, if not more excited about. So we're trying to grow into those other awesome service lines and create more. So it's intentional that word is crossed out. We are absolutely champions of credit unions in general and the cooperative business model. We serve only credit unions, and we really are focused on growth through disruptive innovation. Credit unions are often referred to as the best kept secret. CU Collaborate wants to change this. We want as many people as possible to have access to credit unions because they build more equitable communities. We do this through blended expertise, rigorous consulting, pioneering software, and proven impact. First, and maybe most sad slide is our fearless leader here, Sam Brownell, who many of you know, and some of you may be LinkedIn followers, but he is the founder of CU Collaborate. He was supposed to be our main presenter today, but unfortunately he has fallen ill. So you get me, the B squad, but the A squad in terms of Bob and Emily. I assume Sam probably looks better laying in his bed than he does on this picture. But Sam, if you're listening, feel better. Sorry you couldn't make it. We love you. Wanted to introduce the team here who's on video with me. I'll introduce myself first and then turn it over to Bob and then Emily. My name is Chris Tissue. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and head of our consulting practice. I've been with CU Collaborate for almost 3 years now after spending about 10 in the federal consulting space dealing with Deloitte and Grant Thornton. Started out at Callahan and Associates right out of school, and that's where I cut my teeth on credit unions. I got Sam Brownell an internship, so I'd like to take credit for all of his success. Just kidding. But that is really where we both learned a lot about credit unions, and excited about the path that's led us to this time right now. Bob, I'll turn it over to you for an introduction. Oh, you're on mute, Bob.
Yes, I muted myself. Thank you, Chris. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Fenner. I worked at the NCUA in the legal department for 37 years, I think. I've done consulting and legal work with credit unions since my retirement. And one of the things I do is work as a part-time advisor with CU Collaborate. and I'm happy to be here today to help in any way I can.
Hi, I think this is my first webinar, so I'm excited to be here. My name is Emily Hughes. I joined CU Collaborate about a year ago, or maybe a little bit more than a year ago. Have worked through a ton of field of membership expansion applications. And prior to joining CU Collaborate, I worked in the federal consulting space, also with Chris Tissue.
I'm excited to poach Emily. Emily, thanks for making the jump into credit union world. I trust that it's been exciting thus far. Yeah, so field of membership. Why are we talking about it? Why is it important? What challenges do we see? Want to set the place here about why we as a firm care about it and what we're seeing as some of the hurdles that field of membership can create. To illustrate this, we internally often talk about TAM, SAM, and SOM. For those of you that aren't familiar with this business plan type logic or the traditional marketing funnel, it is a good concept to sort of think about field of membership at various stages. So total addressable market, or TAM, is anyone that has a need for your financial products or services, whatever the business model may be, in this case, financial products and services. The serviceable addressable market, or the SAM, is the part of the total addressable market that you can actually service. Presumably, there will be individuals in your field of membership, like a newborn, who may not actually have a use for your services and products yet, but they will. And then finally, the serviceable obtainable market, and that is the part of the SAM that you obtain, or your market share, or your active membership. So what that looks like from the lens of field of membership is your TAM being your field of membership, the entire population that can join your credit union. The serviceable addressable market are that sliver of that population that actually needs your products or services. And then the SOM in this case is the part of the individuals in your field of membership that you attain, or your membership. Field of membership can be an inhibitor to growth along the funnel. It can narrow the funnel entirely, in that it can restrict who of that TAM can actually join your field of membership, but it can also create friction along the process. So from our perspective, removing field of membership as a barrier to growth and widening the funnel is a really important thing to at least take a look at and know where you stand. That is a takeaway that we hope that you'll have from this presentation, is that you should at least be generally aware of where your credit union's charter stands in the regulatory landscape. Ideally, you're coming back and looking at this every once in a while. But credit unions, field of membership for credit unions is a superpower, right? It helps us maintain our not-for-profit status, which we enjoy, and a business model that we think is optimal for the financial well-being of Americans. But it creates a lot of friction, and not just in terms of the total addressable market that you can reach, but also in terms of Americans' perceptions of credit unions in America, really. So yeah, 40% of consumers are aware of field of membership, but in a bad way, and that in their mind that already creates a barrier for them to consider credit unions for any of their financial needs. This is also the case when you look at abandonment, particularly in online channels, which are getting more and more important as we fight disruptors in the space, like fintechs, who have no traditional brick and mortar requirements and are operating in a very lean and digital focused way. In particular, credit unions have about half of the consumers that enter that online workflow as compared to banks actually complete it. And then the largest portion of them are dropping off at the field of membership eligibility piece. So as we continue to look at all channels, but in particular digital channels, and everyone's driving towards Amazon easy and trying to streamline our workflows and making sure that people are landing in and not just our physical spaces, but our digital spaces. We want to make sure that we're streamlining things as much as we can, and that anyone that lands in any one of our service areas can join the credit union or has a path. Going to skip over to a general 101 of field of membership, and then we'll be looking at the pros and cons of different charter types. So first off, and most importantly, you all benefit, we all benefit from the competition of both the federal charter and the state charter. The pendulum, and Bob, you can speak better to this than me, tends to swing back and forth. Most recently, and maybe most importantly, the federal charter got a little bit more competitive. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, when the ABA unsuccessfully appealed what is now referred to as Field of Membership 3 or FOM 3. That ended up at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not hear it, and that ended that legal battle for now, to be continued. But the federal charter became much more competitive as a function of that. And then the pandemic hit. And so folks maybe weren't as focused on field of membership for a little bit, and that has changed. We'll talk a little bit about that in the future. From a field of membership perspective, the one thing that I would just say with this presentation is all 50 states are different and unique. It is very difficult to summarize the benefits of all state charters versus the federal charter. I will just say from my experience, the one real benefit that many state charters will have as opposed to the federal charter is that they will have more flexible field of membership rules within their state. That is a broad generality, but an example is, in Washington state, many state credit unions in Washington state enjoy a field of membership that covers the entire state. But sometimes you will also see a hybrid of two charters that we will be looking at today, the community and the multiple common bond. And so there may be additional flexibility that is afforded at the state level that might not exactly match up or have parity with the Federal Credit Union Act. Bob, anything to add there or from your perspective? Okay. So I want to talk about the 3 different types of federal charter. This is actually a little bit of a misleading slide because a community is technically a single common bond, I believe, but for the sake of understanding and clarity, we broke them out into 3. 3 main federal charters. We have the single common bond. This is where I believe most, if not all, credit unions get their start. So these can be occupational, for example, employees of Google. They can be trade, industry, or professional. This is a TIP, if you're familiar with that acronym. An example of that might be healthcare workers in the District of Columbia. So they'll be focused more broadly on a actual sector, but that will still have a geography tied to it. You won't see a national geography, at least the federal credit union level. And they can also be associational. So examples of this might be a PTA or electric co-op or a homeowners association are examples of pre-approved associational single common bonds. The second charter type is a community. These are geographies. It could be a single political jurisdiction, which would be a city or a county, or a part of a statistical area or a rural district, but most often these are communicated in terms of entire counties. And then finally, the multiple common bond. This is actually just many single common bonds in a charter, and we'll talk about this quite a bit later on, but they can be both occupational or associational, as well as serve underserved areas, which we'll talk pretty extensively about later in the presentation. Primarily, we're going to talk most about the community and the multiple common bond charter. What we find is a really telling slide in terms of the evolution of many credit union charters is this graph here. This is a look at the relative makeup of the different charter types across assets. I realize that the labels might be small here, so I will just provide a quick overview. In the left side here, we have under 25 million in assets, here 25 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 500, 500 to $1 billion, and then $1 billion and 10 billion plus. The blue is the state charter. So you see that state charters really do enjoy greater market share as you move up through these asset categories until the 10 billion plus, when presumably credit unions outgrow even individual state charters. Within the federal charter, you can see that single common bond credit unions become much less prevalent. as credit unions graduate from the 25 million assets and above category, and really do decrease until the 10 billion plus. It'd be interesting to look at those. I'm not exactly sure who those large credit unions are that are single common bond. The federal community charter really becomes very, very popular all the way up until the 500 million plus, when presumably many of the community charter credit unions again oversaturate their market. Each market is unique. We'll talk about the community charter in a second to put some metrics around that and what field of membership populations that might occur. And then interestingly, the federal multiple common bond is very popular up until the 100 million, and then decreases in market share, so to speak, until around the 500 million to a billion, where it becomes more popular again. In the community charter decreases, you see more credit unions going to state or multiple common bond, and then grows in the 1 billion and plus category. Bob, is there anything you wanted to add to this slide, or just the general lay of the land in terms of state and federal charters?
No, other than to say that it varies greatly from state to state, the ratio of federal to state charters, and depends on, in some states, state field of membership law is much more liberal than the federal law, and allows communities and multiple groups to combine in the same charter, for example. So there is a lot of variance from state to state.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We have a lot of research on some states. I mean, field of membership, when you're considering the state or federal charter, is just one element. I think we looked at a few, and we're looking at 22 different things to consider outside of field of membership. But it is important to sort of assess, and if anyone has particular questions about a state versus federal, please feel free to reach out, and we can provide more specific information that's not great for a large group on the state charter versus the federal charter. As I mentioned, we're going to be comparing primarily the federal charter, the community, and the multiple common bond, as those are the two most prevalent across most asset classes. Don, I saw that Washington State does allow for statewide charter. So yeah, not many Washington State to federal charter conversions for us. But yeah, wanted to go over the community charter in a bit more detail. So there are three types of what the NCUA determines as presumptive communities. Bob, you can check me on the history here, but before presumptive communities, it's my understanding that applying for a larger community was an exhaustive process, and that you had to really tell a story about how a given area demonstrated what the NCUA calls as common interest and interaction. The good news for all of us is they've streamlined this and made it very data-driven, and they've leaned on their good friends at the Census Bureau to tell us what statistically and is a community by their definition. The two most popular that we do are statistical area. So this is an all or a portion of a combined statistical area or core-based statistical area. It's a contiguous area. So again, these are geographies, either counties or census tracts or county subdivisions. And the important piece here is that the total population must be 2.5 million or less. So these are metro areas predominantly. And yeah, I think in many metro areas across the country, save for a handful of very large ones, you might be able to potentially get the entire statistical area without hitting that 2.5 million, but that's a very broad generalization. The other popular type is a rural district. So this is the opposite of a statistical area in the rural parts of the country. These are also contiguous areas. They must remain in states that are next to the state that you're headquartered in. So you can't leap over 3 states by connecting a bunch of counties, but they must be 1 million or less in population, and they have to have under 100 people per square mile. The benefits of a community charter, expansion relative to a few others is fairly straightforward. Emily's going to talk about that in a second in terms of what it looks like to expand a community charter at the federal level. The one real benefit from a field of membership perspective is that it's easy to communicate and understand relative to the federal multiple common bond. A community charter's bylaws will look fairly straightforward in listing out counties where an individual lives, works, worships, participates, or goes to school in, and can be a number of different iterations of that. I think we found 126 in our review of all credit unions eligibility rules. So there's a lot of iterations of that, but they are based on geographies, and many times the general public will at least know how they relate to that in terms of a county. It is somewhat easy to understand and communicate relative to multiple common bond charter. There are special low income designations set aside for benefits from a field of membership perspective for federal community charters who are LID certified. And a benefit here too is relative to the state is one examiner. A quick statistic, just so you could potentially assess yourself if you are a community charter against how the group is doing. On average, community charters, federal community charters have a 1.48% market share. So as you're potentially taking this to your board for strategic planning or bringing up field of membership to reassess, we felt that this was an important metric to share that we can't necessarily do with full confidence on multiple common bonds, because it's much harder to assess what their potential field of membership is. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about the application process for federal community?
Yeah, I do. So imagining that you're applying for a field of membership or an expanded field of membership under the community charter type, your application is going to have to include 3 major components. That's the service area and then the marketing and business plans. So the service area is very straightforward. You're just going to lay out the specific geography that you're requesting and high-level demographics. But the marketing plan is a bit more complicated. This is an opportunity to outline additional demographic details and then draw a connection between those demographic details and the products and services that are going to be most useful to that audience. So you'll need to illustrate that you understand like the features of the population within the FOM, and you have a plan in place to get targeted messaging to your diverse audiences. And I'll say the connecting piece is outlining a marketing medium and message that's going to resonate with your audience. Another key component of the marketing plan is the work that you do in your community. This is an opportunity for you to talk up the work that you do, sometimes face-to-face with members and potential members, and explore how that allows you to raise your brand awareness and also learn from your members and potential members. In the business plan, I like to think of this as what it is that you bring to your members and the logistics for getting that to your members. So you'll be laying out specific information about your branch infrastructure and your online and mobile banking infrastructure, and provide a lot of details around the products and services that you offer. A key component of this section is specifying the financial investments that you're going to make, especially if you'll be serving a greater number of members. So primarily, these will be costs associated with hiring, and also if you're going to be making investments in expanding your branches or making investments in ATMs or ITMs. And then finally, you will need to provide projections for your income statement and balance sheet, and this will include those for the base year, the year that you're applying for, as well as 2 additional out years, and will be inclusive of other key metrics.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Switching over to the multiple common bond here and how this charter compares to the community charter. Again, the way that these groups have historically grown is through the addition of groups and doing business development in a very different way than the community, and focusing on the relationships with sometimes HR departments, and really pitching credit union membership as a benefit of being a part of an occupational or associational common bond. Interestingly, multiple common bond credit unions are the only credit unions that can add underserved areas. There's been recent legislation to potentially allow federal community charters to also add underserved areas, but I don't believe that has passed yet, or maybe even has a high probability of success. I think it may have even been stripped out of the recent regulation. So doesn't seem like that will be available in the short term, but it is an area of interest clearly. Underserved areas, just before we get into them, also serve as community rules, which is an interesting element of the federal multiple common bond, is that they can still have the associational or occupational common bonds, but then add community rules that fit a more narrowly defined criteria that we'll talk about. In terms of the benefits of multiple common bond, it really is that ability to do both that is very powerful. So being able to grow outside of a community, if that community charter is becoming restrictive and is potentially maxed out within a statistical area, or is right at that 1 million population in terms of a rural district. One really big benefit outside of the underserved areas, which we'll talk about too, is in mergers. Obviously, mergers are continuing to clip along at a very steady pace. I feel like we see almost one a day. In our conversations with people who are more involved in the matchmaking of mergers, sometimes community charters won't even be considered because of the friction. Community chartered credit union, at least the federal level, to be merged into another federal community must fit entirely within their community boundaries, which can create, again, a delay in just the overall process, and may leave some community charters outside of consideration when M&A activity is occurring. Generally speaking, for multiple common bond, they can just be merged as long as there aren't conflicting underserved areas or groups. Yeah, I think that covers the real benefits of the multiple common bond. One piece that I didn't mention, but I'll mention now, that is a strategy that many credit unions are taking, is the associational path, or the open association. There are several groups in the United States, if you have a service facility conveniently located near them, that you can add, that will effectively allow you to open up your doors to anyone in the country or the world, so long as they are willing to join that group. Two examples that come to mind are the American Consumer Council or the Financial Fitness Association. These organizations are set up in a perfect way to, for lack of a better term, deputize you to help sign up folks and refer folks to their membership. They both have missions that are aligned to protecting the consumer and financial literacy and wellness. So that is a nice nexus. There are many others that also exist in charitable organizations. But one thing that federal multiple common bond credit unions will do is, deploy an association like this to make sure that anyone that would like to become a member, there is a path out there for them. One consideration is that we do see, back to one of the previous slides, that the associational piece can have a higher drop-off rate than the Lives, Works, Worships community rules. And so for that reason, CU Collaborate believes that the community rules are still important. And so for multiple common bond credit unions, underserved areas are important to still focus on the geographical elements of the multiple common bond charter, but the associational backdoor, or just the open association, is something that a lot of federal credit unions enjoy, and makes them comfortable in that they could do business really anywhere. Underserved areas are something that's very popular amongst CU Collaborate members, and is becoming one of the most popular types of field of membership expansions that we've seen in the past couple of years. Part of that is some innovation on our end in terms of the way that we assess them. I won't go into the details because many of you will probably be falling asleep, especially if you're on in the middle of the country and it's lunch hour. But the underserved areas are great. They fit perfectly within the credit union mission of focusing on individuals of lower income individuals or those of less that don't have of means. And really the unfortunate piece of this is that they're incredibly hard to qualify. It's difficult to meet the 3 criteria here. So meeting the definition of a community, that's fairly simple, but assessing whether an area which generally is made up of census tracts is an investment area can be difficult. The CDFI, if you're familiar with the Community Development Financial Institutions, part of the Department of the Treasury, rules out which census tracts or in counties actually meet this criteria. So a given area has to show that no more than 15% of the population is coming from well-to-do or non-distressed areas, which means that at least 85% of a population must be coming from what are determined as distressed tracts, and that is a fairly complicated metric. And then it also must be underserved by other depositories. And what this metric is also keeping in balance is that those parts of the entire area have less of the entire underserved area have less access to financial institutions, both credit unions and banks, than those in the non-distressed or more well-to-do parts of the area. So the takeaway for you is that this is a really great option if you are a federal multiple common bond credit union and you are interested in potentially having community rules. The challenge is that it can be difficult to assess and scope what's possible. One thing that we've been able to do as a company, I don't think that this is moving. Okay, is it moving for everyone? Is develop some software, which it's called Expand CU. This allowed us initially to be a little bit more incrementally adept at assessing what areas might qualify as an underserved area, and that enterprising credit union practitioner or consultant could come in and draw geographies based on census tracts and see if the area did meet the criteria that I just outlined, and keeping all of the equations in balance. What we found is that some of our multiple common bond credit unions wanted to add multiple areas, which was great. A federal multiple common bond credit union can add unlimited underserved areas so long as they have a service facility in the area within 24 months. And interestingly, what this eventually led us to do is create optimization software. So instead of Emily or myself going in and actually hand drawing it and toiling away the hours to figure out how best to configure these for credit unions, we've removed ourselves and allowed the computers to take over. And in some instances, they'll run as many as millions of scenarios, and we can give it a given goal to accomplish an overall objective. So in the example of this slide here, this was an example of a credit union who's in the Augusta, Georgia MSA. If I could draw, and I don't even know if you guys can see my arrow, but really in the center there, they're very constrained by a community, and by drawing, I believe this is 6 different underserved areas, which you can see puzzle piece together. They're actually sort of ironically able to capture a larger community footprint than would be allowed for a community charter. So there's some important considerations here, in that you also have additional application criteria that Emily's going to talk about. But the takeaway for really the strength of the federal multiple common bond charter is that you can kind of have the best of both worlds if you operate in certain parts of the country. I should also mention that this strategy is really most powerful in the South, in the West, in the Northeast. We can still add meaningful geographies, but it's not as disruptive to the community charter as it is in the other parts of the country. Emily, I'll let you talk about the application requirements for the underserved areas.
Awesome. Yeah, everything that I said for the applications under the community charter type holds, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But there are 2 additional components for an underserved area application that are really important. So the first is that your area needs to be verified by the NCUA. So that needs to be approved for the application to move forward. The verification consists of a check that the area meets that definition of a community, that it is an investment area under CDFI rules, and then also the area you're proposing to serve is underserved by other financial institutions. And then the other piece is the significant unmet needs piece. And the key to this is your ability to illustrate your understanding of the unique needs of the underbanked or underserved individuals in the area that you're proposing to serve. And then also specifying a credit or deposit offering that meets that need and addresses the need.
Thanks. Can you give us a few examples, Emily? I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Of
great products that we've
Okay.
highlighted for some of our members.
I think a big product that many credit unions do offer and is truly something that is significantly helping people who struggle to make ends meet and live sort of paycheck to paycheck is that small dollar loan. So it depends on the geography, since payday lending is restricted differently in different states. But those alternatives are so financially burdensome for the underbanked or the underserved. The credit union is really offering a very competitive product that, again, is going to make a big difference and help close that financial gap for an individual.
Thank you. Yeah, we often find small dollar lending alternatives, sort of like
Also,
risk-based lending. Sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Well, I was going to say another thing that's really important for people who are underbanked or underserved is overcoming the hurdles to even opening a savings account. So a lot of traditional banks or larger banks have minimum deposit requirements that are sort of out of reach for individuals, again, who are living paycheck to paycheck. So when credit unions are able to have those low minimum deposits and they're not charging fees on their savings account, that is also really advantageous for the community.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a lot of great products that we've seen and been able to work with credit unions who are offering and really doing really cool lending and really safe deposits accounts. It varies greatly depending on your market in terms of what the needs are. Fighting payday lenders, cash checking, pawn brokers. So I hear pay here auto lots. I think the most interesting one we've ever done is mobile homes that are not affixed to the foundation. So it can even be very niche underwriting standards that we've highlighted. But yeah, it is a really, really critical piece of this to show that, the credit union difference is showing up in terms of these underserved areas, showing the NCUA that, there's a real need there and that you're ready to meet the need through the Sun section and also, your business and marketing plan. Thanks, Emily. One thing I wanted to wrap up with here, and then we'll jump into the Q&A, but a consideration and one of the toughest questions we get is, how long does the application process take at the federal level? The answer is difficult. It really varies depending on the size of the ask and the business and marketing plan and how, for lack of a better term, aggressive your field of membership growth is. That said, I think things are taking a little bit longer. I think partially because of the federal charter becoming more competitive. There's more application demand. Certainly, underserved areas and the focus on how they're able to be deployed for credit unions, again, particularly in the South and the West, is increasing demand. So I think. So at least we FOIA'd the data, and this is what it said on average about 170 days from submission to getting approved. But that is a very big generalization and really depends on the size of the ask. Yeah, just some quick takeaways here before we open it up to discussion and question and answer. Understand the charter options that are available to you and the pros and cons of them, even if it means that you ultimately decide to do nothing. I personally believe that this would be a good thing to revisit, every 2 to 3 years with your board and just let them know that you've looked at it and you either think you're still great or there may be an opportunity or a challenge. And then if field membership is an inhibitor to your goals, assess the pros and cons. figure out a plan if it does create, if there is the need for a charter conversion, great. Otherwise, maybe just a field of membership expansion. One thing I also just would mention too is that we didn't cover growth through groups because that process is a bit more, for lack of a better term, like administrative, and the NCUA is quite adept at adding groups to the multiple common bond, but that is also a primary driver of potential field of membership growth for those credit unions and continuing to market their products and services specifically to occupational and associational groups. So yeah, that covers our prepared remarks. I've got some contact information here, but yeah, wanted to make sure that we had at least 17 minutes of Q&A. So I'll just, Maren, I don't know if you want to start firing away and we can answer them in turn.
Yeah, I think we should start with the question from Lisa Alvin. Is there a suggested budget to include in a marketing plan?
Yeah, so you will need to include specific base year and out year projections for your marketing budget. We work with our clients to tailor their budgets. The NCUA, I think, is going to look for you to be investing in serving a greater number of members if that is your goal. But I think the key here is making sure the growth is commensurate and you're using media strategies that are enabling you to reach your audience in a way that is cost effective.
Bob, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, well, in my experience, NCUA is looking to see that you're increasing your marketing budget in proportion to the area that you're adding, and that you're going to devote those additional resources to bringing in members in that area, serving that area.
Yeah, and I guess I would just sort of recap as, there's not a magic number, which I think a lot of people wish there were. Many of our clients are doubling, tripling, or more their potential field of membership, and doing that from a marketing perspective just doesn't really make good marketing sense or fiscal sense. It lacks the concept of timing, right? And that you've now got a larger market and you can grow into that. But if you're looking for a benchmark out there, I think on average the entire industry spends 49 cents per potential member per year on marketing. So that is just sort of a walk around number, but perhaps obviously every market is different. Mediums are vastly different. Digital media is incredibly cost effective. One thing that we've noticed for some of our clients who've leaned more heavily on digital marketing is that the NCUA, and particularly with underserved area, but across all applications, including the community charter, are very focused on those individuals who may not have access to the internet or be willing to access the internet for their banking needs. And so in those regards, the NCUA wants to see that you're also employing some level of traditional media to reach those individuals, and that you're also leveraging your community-based organizations to make sure that your outreach is inclusive. Hopefully that answers your question.
Alrighty, so the next question is from Peter. Can an underserved by a national association that focuses on a certain ethnic group and qualify as an associational underserved?
No, it has to be a community.
Yeah, underserved area, if I'm understanding the question, is a geography that meets those criteria. Peter, I apologize if we're not understanding you. Feel free to hit us up in the chat if that was not the right interpretation of your question. What's next, Maren?
Next is David with how would a multi-common bond charter go about merging in a community charter?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did want, okay, I see you addressed Donald. So Isaac, yeah, the way that and there are several, there's a matrix on the NCUA's website that I think is amazing for mergers. We can also maybe try and drop it in the appendix of the slides because it does show all the different criteria. But if you're looking to merge in a community charter as a multiple common bond, you could, have the community potentially keep their community charter, and you could draw underserved areas that entirely overlap that community charter. So there's a path for you to use underserved areas to merge in a community through the same type of field of membership language. Bob, Emily, did I miss anything there?
Well, you can merge a multiple common bond into a community under the federal rules, and you just have to give up all of the groups that are outside of the community. And, the members of the merging credit have to vote to approve that. So
yeah,
how likely it is, depending on the portion of the membership that's going to be excluded from the ability to join the merged credit union.
Hopefully that answers your question. What do you have next, Maren?
The next question is from Scott. Are you seeing more credit unions use subordinate debt to help finance expansion plans?
Bob?
I have no knowledge that would enable me to answer that question.
Okay. We have a few in our client base where it's a part of their strategy. I think one thing that I would add to that is that, there's expansion activities that are tethered to that, such as bank acquisitions, M&A activity, branch building, so sort of like capital investments. So if, the answer is yes. I just don't know that it's relatively more than it was before. Is the only part of that I can't answer. But yeah, certainly for those low-income designated credit unions that can have sub debt, we have several that are building that into their pro formas as part of their expansion plan.
Alrighty, next from Isaac. You mentioned the requirement to have a service facility when adding an underserved area. Is shared branching considered as a service facility in this case?
Yeah, love this question. Thank you, Isaac. This was near and dear to our heart, and public service announcement coming at you. So yeah, this is a great question. The NCUA board last November, December finalized a rule that would technically allow a service facility to meet a shared branch to meet the definition of a service facility. The largest shared branching network that I'm aware of is Co-op, and Co-op branches currently have one outstanding requirement to meet the definition of a service facility, and that, to our knowledge, members cannot go in and actually apply for a loan there. So for any of you who are Co-op members out there, or people who are considered being Co-op shared branching members, we've got a lovely letter that you can send over to them, which details our ideas for how they can meet that requirement without potentially risking the member experience. And we'd be happy to share that with you. We are hopeful that we will get them to agree with us, and that they'll update their operating procedures so that there's some manual paper-based way that a member could theoretically apply for a loan at your credit union at another credit union. I think the thing that I would also mention for underserved area service facility pieces is the important piece is that you're an issuer. So that means that your members are able to go into another credit union shared branch and conduct business, not necessarily that other credit union members are able to come into yours. So that's an important caveat for the shared branching piece of underserved areas, but also community expansions where you're using shared branching as a way to show that you can serve an expanded territory.
Chris, I think the new definition of service facility is any branch, shared branch, ATM, shared ATM that does one of three things: accepts deposits, accepts loan applications, or disperses loan proceeds. So, but for underserved areas, it excludes ATMs are excluded.
Right.
For an underserved area, to add an underserved area, you should be able to rely on a shared branch as long as that shared branch accepts deposits, which I think most of them do. Doesn't
I'm sorry, Bob, are you saying that it's do one of those, or because it was my understanding that it's all inclusive, that you have to be able to do all three.
I think so.
Yeah. But yeah,
Let me look at the rule.
Yeah, we'll out the rules there, Bobby. We can
Yeah.
go to another question, but yeah, it was sort of my understanding that co-op met two of the three, and that you could accept deposits and issue loan proceeds. That would be done digitally, but it can be done. The biggest thing is the application for a loan piece was missing. So our suggestion to co-op was to simply have a paper-based application, and that a member could, a credit union could fax it to the recipient credit union. And I guess from a field of membership perspective, what's really important is that that's possible, so that we're meeting all the requirements. So fairly crude, and they could improve it over time, but that was our initial thinking.
I want to add in Kristen's question really quickly, because she was asking about a virtual branch. So what about a virtual branch?
Not in consideration right now for the service facility. I think the NCUA, in their opinion, even expressly says that. So unfortunately, we're not there yet, but the NCUA does seem to be making really great strides in terms of considering your digital service offerings in terms of field of membership expansion. So it is something that we really prominently highlight in our applications. Emily, anything to add there in terms of like remote services?
I mean, I think what I say is like people are using remote services more and more. So hopefully the NCUA eventually evolves in their thinking and their approach to that. But right now, yeah, not a service facility.
The next question is from Dan concerning problems with a service facility within 24 months. His quote is, I understand that the NCUA doesn't consider ATM networks or internet banking to meet that requirement.
I wonder if this question is about having a service facility established within 24 months, but not at the time of application. Potentially that's the.
An ATM is a service facility for purposes of adding a SEG.
Right.
Associational or occupational SEG. An ATM is not a service facility for purposes of adding an underserved area, according to the recent rules.
Right.
Sorry, Emily, I apologize if I interrupted you.
No, it's confusing. There's two definitions of a service facility for multiple common bond groups, depending on if you're adding a group or a underserved area. Two different requirements.
All right, the next question is from Lisa. Is member approval needed to change from a federal common bond charter to a state charter? And how common is it to make a move like that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Aaron? Or Emily, maybe you can take it.
Well, it's federal common bond to state charter. Have we supported any federal bond to state charter conversions?
I have not done one recently, no.
I would think it depends on how advantageous the state charter rules are for your strategy, right?
I think the question was whether a membership vote is required. Is that right, Mary?
There's two questions, yeah. So the first is member approval needed to change from federal to state?
I would have to look that up quickly. I don't know off the top of my head. I've been doing way more state to federal conversions.
I think so, but yeah, we should look.
Yeah, we can look. Mary, do you mind just taking an action item for us to follow up with that individual?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thanks.
Moving on to the next question from Jill. If you already have a community charter, if you are a relative of an established member, can you join, regardless if you are or are not in the community area? And if yes, does that answer have to be written in your charter, or is it just a known critical tenet of the credit union? It's quite a long question. It is in the chat if you want to look at it. It's a question from Jill.
Bob, that one, yeah, so it's referencing affinity clauses, which are, oftentimes relation to people who are eligible. Does that have to be explicitly laid out in the charter, or is it implied?
Well, the section 5 of the charter is the field of membership clause, and it should have in it, it would have to have in it, but every credit I've ever worked with has it, the ability of family members of anyone who's in the core membership to join. And so the family members can join whether or not the individual who's in the core group of membership has joined. So there's a lot of flexibility there, but the credit union does have to have that language in section 5 of their charter.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Immediate family members.
So can we go back for a moment to the definition of service facility?
Sure.
Here's what the rules say. A place where shares are accepted for members' accounts, loan applications are accepted, or loans are dispersed. So it doesn't have to be all three, according to the rules.
Or versus
Okay.
and.
Bob, is that from the most recent?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the ECFR, which I linked to from NCUA's website. So it, couldn't be any more authoritative, I don't think. Service facility does not include an ATM or a shared ATM. That's for purposes of an underserved area.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that language may conflict with the.
Oh, wait. Sorry. Okay, for purposes of serving an underserved area, the service facility is a place where shares are accepted, loan applications are accepted, and loans are dispersed.
Yeah. No, all good.
So there are two differences for an underserved area. Can't be an ATM, and all three services have to be.
Right. Yeah, and just to recap there. Yeah, just to recap, it's our understanding that currently co-op does not meet that loan application piece. So again, reach out to us if you'd like a suggestion on how to send a really politely worded email to co-op to request that they make that change. Awesome. It looks like we're at time. I think we may have actually gotten through many of our questions.
We have two questions left.
Okay.
But I can make sure we follow up with those people after.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. We'd like to make sure that you all got everything out of the webinar. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time and all of the thoughtful questions. We hope that this was helpful. If not, certainly let us know. If there was something that we didn't cover, we're happy to send along additional information. I will also just give a shout out to our blog where we cover a lot of these topics too, and we have some really great writing on it. So yeah, please feel free to reach out, and thank you all again for attending today. I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.